If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may.
Welcome to another episode of The School Without Walls. I am the host, Dr. Antonio Hobbs, and today we are going to talk about the fighting aces of World War I later on. However, before we get into that, I want to remind you of the goals of the School Without Walls. The School Without Walls is designed for the edification and education of the African American male primarily. However, we have more than that concern. We are concerned about training young African American males how to do good in life, how to have a good work ethic, having them to understand that college is a wonderful thing, but it's not for everybody, but a trade is needed. In other words, we want them to be able to survive. We want them to learn to respect authority and work together for the betterment of themselves. Economics is very key. There's an old saying that when poverty comes through the door, love goes out of the window. So we want them to understand the importance of preparing themselves to make a living in order that they would be able to take care of a wife and children. Now, we also have as our theme for this year is Black History after February. So we're going to talk a little bit about the importance of that, and we want to establish a dialogue in the community, especially through the African American churches, by which ministers will get that congregation involved in doing more than the traditional 11 o'clock service. We have educational buildings, but we want to have an educational program in those buildings. For example, traditionally the African American church was the culture center for the African American community. I encourage us to remember that and keep that alive. We talk about building recreational centers for our children. They don't have any place. We have enough buildings here in Pine Bluff. If we would organize to keep our children busy during the summer. So we got to quit making excuses and utilize what we have. Now, back to the idea of Black history. I have a list of inventors here. Did you know that the air conditioning unit was developed by Frederick M. Jones? The air conditioning unit was developed by Frederick M. Jones. July the 12th, 1949. The almanac, Benjamin Banneker, approximately 1791. Benjamin Banneker is an interesting person to know. It so happened that Benjamin Banneker was never a slave. Benjamin Banneker was born out east in Maryland, in the Baltimore, Maryland area, and his father was a free African American, and his mother was a white woman. And Benjamin Banneker, along with a number of African Americans who were never slaves, that's not brought out very much in our educational system. We have a number of several hundred African Americans that were free during the time that the African Americans were enslaved in the South, and Benjamin Banneker was one of them, and he also was very scholarly. He is responsible for the clock as we know it today, the Big Ben, and it is believed that he came up with a clock that had the tone in it, like the Big Ben in London. We had clocks before Benjamin Banneker, but we didn't have one that had this sound, this tone, or this bell in it, and he's responsible for that. And we also have some other inventors. The automatic gear shift in cars, Richard Spikes, February 28th, 1932, came up with that. And the baby buggy, W.H. Richardson, June 18, 1899, came up with the baby buggy. So we will stop on this for today, but each episode will give you some history. And the idea is not just to learn what I'm saying, but to learn the importance of making history. Keep in mind that history is nothing but what happened in the past. Keep records. Our churches have a lot of good records, and we want to compile those and become more involved as a people rather than waiting on other people to do for us.
Did you find it? Elbows up.
You taught him how to hit a baseball,
Just like that. Say hi!
how to hit a receiver,
Nice.
the strike zone, the net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
I will not be news today. I will not merchandise my success with a variety of easy-to-pronounce products and services like David Oyelowo's olive oil, Oyelowo's royal oleo, or even Oyelowo's yellow oboes. I'm David Oyelowo, and I will not be trending today because there is a much bigger story that needs to be heard.
I'm going to continue with black inventors and inventions, but before I go into that, I have a little something called Did You Know? Did you know that in 1776 there was a war in the United States between the U.S. citizens and Great Britain? It was called the Revolutionary War, and that is what we're celebrating on the 4th of July. The reason I bring that up, Randy, we have a lot of people don't know why they celebrate the 4th of July. They just haven't got time, and especially the African Americans. The African Americans were slaves during that time, so let's be aware of that. And I always point to the pastors of our churches because that's the only leadership that I know that is basically exclusively African American leadership of the churches. So inform your people so they be aware. I'm not saying don't go out and have fun, but know why you're doing it. The African American was legally freed in 1863. That's called the Emancipation Proclamation, and the local NAACP here in Pine Bluff has a celebration 1st of January every year. And this year was the first one I missed in the last 20 years, and we don't have over 35 people out there. So I'm assuming it's because you don't know what it's all about. So we're asking you to make a note on your calendar that the African Americans were emancipated, which meant legally freed, in 1863. And the NAACP has a program celebrating that the 1st of January in each year. So let us try to get on the ball. There's an old proverb, and a proverb is nothing but a wise saying in case somebody think it has to come from the Bible. A proverb is a wise saying. There's a story about the ants. Let us learn from the ants. The ants were out there build their home on the golf court, and there was a nearsighted golfer that placed his ball upon the ant hill, and he hit underneath the ball and he killed about 1,000 ants. Nearsighted golf player placed his ball back on the remaining part of that mount, and the ants called a meeting. They said, "Have you noticed that man hits underneath the ball each time?" He said, "Yes, we do." So he said, "If we want to survive, I think we should get on the ball." And I'm saying, as African American people, if you intend to survive, you got to develop leadership, you got to get on the ball, and do not think it's robbery that you become independent thinkers in this United States of America and become allies with the majority race rather than dependents. And you have to think to do that. So, Emancipation Proclamation is celebrated the 1st of January each year. Please make a note of that and show up. Now, there's something called Juneteenth that I've heard some of them ask questions about. What is this Juneteenth thing? Well, after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in Washington, D.C., keep in mind they didn't have television, radios, and very few newspapers. So the people in Texas did not get the news that the African slaves had been emancipated. So for quite some time, in one account, it was a year, I think, a year or so before the news got down to Texas. So somebody finally got to Texas and say, "I noticed that you all still have slaves." Say they were freed some time ago. And the African Americans, not being natives of the English language, could not say June the 19th. They said Juneteenth, Juneteenth. So they started celebrating Juneteenth, which was June the 19th, was when they learned that they had been emancipated, and that spread it throughout the adjoining states such as Mississippi, and it finally got to Arkansas. Now, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back in we have 2 more minutes on this side. So what we're going to do now is talk about black inventors and black inventions. And keep in mind, the reason I'm doing this is twofold. One-fold is to give you information. Secondly is to encourage you to write history, especially the young people, and read that which is written. We have something called, I believe the last one I mentioned was the baby buggy, but the bicycle frame was developed by L.R. Johnson, October the 10th, 1899. Now someone might say, what do you mean? They had a bicycle before they had a frame. Well, I mean the contemporary frame that we have today with 2 wheels on it. Earlier they had a bicycle frame with 1 large wheel and a small wheel, and that didn't work out so well. But this particular type of bike that we ride today was done by L.R. Johnson, October the 10th, 1899. The biscuit cutter. Young folk probably don't know what a biscuit is. A biscuit is bread, right? It's not in a loaf. And of course, back in my day when I was a child, most of us, our parents made bread in the morning called biscuits, and they have a cutter was designed by A.P. Ashbourne, November 10th, 1875. And we're going to stop on that one. We'll be back after break.
I live with no labels by not being afraid to be who I am.
There's no cookie cutter way to show it. There's no outline. It's love is what you make it. Love is what you want it to be.
To me, love is blind.
And love is for everybody, no matter who it is.
Well, it means that love is endless. Love doesn't stop because you grew up a certain way, because you love someone who has the same gender as you.
Love has no labels means
Acceptance.
You are the best love of my life.
The human race. That's the only label I subscribe to.
It just seems like an obvious thing. Why would it have labels?
When you see what's underneath, the essence of a person, that's what you should be looking at.
Freedom to love whoever you want.
love is love.
And that is love with no labels. I saw the video and I came out, honestly, because I was really scared. But I saw this video and other people were starting to accept it and just be okay. It gave me the courage to come out to my family and my friends.
I'm the product of a biracial marriage, so it personally touched me just seeing the different colors represented.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Dr. Hobbs, host of this educational program called The School Without Walls. Our theme for this year is Black History After February. I'd like to take a little time to explain to you why I'm saying Black History After February. In the 1930s, there was a PhD black PhD, graduated from Harvard University, which was a rare thing in that day, and he started 1 week of black history, realizing the importance of history. And somewhere along the way, about 30 years back, we had increased that to a month. February is the month that we set aside for black history. So I'm saying that inasmuch as all other ethnic groups understand their history, it's time for us to have black history 12 months out of the year, not depending on the public school system. I want to put a pinpoint right here and mention this. I was a part of a lobbyist about 30 years ago that lobbied here in the state of Arkansas to have black history put into the public school system. And the result of that was, sometime later, Senator Gene Edwards here in Pine Bluff introduced the idea to the state legislature. He was on an education committee, and that became law. So we have a law now stating that black history should be integrated into the public school systems of the state of Arkansas, in the social studies, in all of the social studies. And I've observed that, and very little change has been made. And the reason I think it is because most of the board members don't know that particular law exists. So I'm saying that board members, be sure to look into that, and superintendents, and it's your responsibility to integrate that history of the African American into the social science courses. But in the meantime, we'll have to do the best we can, and I'm encouraging our black preachers to understand that you're the only black leaders that we can turn to that has a congregation or a population of people that you can work with to help to educate your people outside of the public school system. Again, Mr. Gene Edwards, Senator Gene Edwards here in Pine Bluff, who lives in the area of Tucker. They call it Castoria or Pastoria. I believe it's Pastoria. He lives in that area. He was the author of that. So back to what I have here. I have a list of black inventors or inventions. Blood plasma bag was invented by Dr. Charles Drew around 1945. Of course, Dr. Charles Drew not only invented the plasma bag, he invented plasma. He was the one that was the first scientist to take blood and process it in a way by which we could use it in our bodies. The cellular phone is pretty popular today. Most children have one. Black man, Henry T. Sampson, July the 6th, 1971. The cellular phone, Henry T. Sampson, July the 6th, 1971. The clothes dryer. What could we do without a clothes dryer? G.T. Sampson, June the 6th, 1862. Now, we have something called the curtain rod. The curtain rod, that all women are familiar with that curtain rod. I've gotten sick of trying to help my wife get the curtain rod through the curtain. S.R. Scranton, November the 30th, 1889. All right, now we have the curtain rod support. William S. Grant, August the 4th, 1896. Doorstop, Old Dorsey, December the 10th, 1878. I'm hoping some of you are writing this down because you have a responsibility to carry this message on to somebody else, okay? We have the dustpan, Lawrence P. Ray, August the 3rd, 1897. The egg beater, William Johnson, February the 5th, 1884. The electric lamp bulb, Louis Latimer, March the 21st, 1882. Louis Latimer invented several other things that I don't have right at my fingertip now, but I remember him quite a bit in the invention area. Now the elevator, Alexander Miles, October the 11th, 1867. The eye protector, or eye gogglers, P. Johnson, November the 2nd, 1880. The fire escape ladder. Where would we be without the fire escape ladder? J.W. Winters, May the 7th, 1876. The folding bed, L.C. Bailey, July the 18th, 1899. The folding chair, Bobby and Surgwar, S-U-R-G-W-R, June the 11th, 1889. Then the fountain pen, W.D. Purvis, January 7, 1890. Now, we're getting ready to close out on this episode, but the reason this is so important should be clear. In early America, in order to justify the enslavement of the Africans, the people in power declared that they had never contributed to civilization, actually didn't have the capability, and this was never true, and therefore so many truths about the achievement of the African American was kept from them, which caused people to look down upon them. And if you want people to see you as a bona fide human being, you got to work for it, and you got to establish the truth about your achievements. Again, I want to thank Mr. Randy Kelley for shooting this and editing this, and hopefully on the 22nd of July, we'll be back with Mr. Tariq Balderos, and he's going to talk about the Flying Aces, who were African-American airmen, and several other things. God bless you.